Welcome back to ESBR Boxing. Delighted to be joined by Elliot and Danny. We are in awe of Dmitry Bivol's performance against Gilberto Ramirez last night, and we are looking forward to seeing what's going to happen next with Bivol and can this guy be beaten. He is now 21-0, 11 knockouts, undefeated. He's been a pro for a while. Impressive performance against Ramirez. As we know, he beat Bivol. He beat Canelo Alvarez earlier this year as the underdog as well. So really going to be rattling your brains in terms of who can beat this guy. Elliot, how are you? How's things?
Yeah, good man, good. I was thankful actually. I know people are saying it's all sport washing and all that jazz, but I'm actually delighted that the boxing was in Abu Dhabi last night. Got to see it, got to have a nice sleep, got to watch a match of the day. I'm all for it, frankly. So yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you? How are you guys?
Yeah, it was a nice little change with it being at around 9 o'clock, really, compared to kind of 10:45, 11, which is what we've kind of had to get used to in this country, but it is what it is. Danny, how are things with you? You kind of regularly do all nighters. So I imagine 9 o'clock was quite early for you.
Yeah, I was only getting started, mate. David that night. As long as Elliott Greg gets a good night's sleep, just forget about the human rights atrocities. No, all good, all good.
This is the new one. Okay, cool. Getting right into it. Obviously, whenever there is a big fight and it finishes, everyone's already talking about what happens next. I feel like with Bivol, there are two mega fights that there are demand for in the boxing world. We are going to go to Artur Beterbiev first, who is also undefeated, massive puncher in the light heavyweight division. We know him kind of quite well in this country. He is supposed to be fighting Anthony Yarde in a couple of months. He has fought Callum Johnson in the past and won via KO, of course. Going to put it on you guys. Beterbiev, Bivol, 50-50 fights, very different styles. But I want to know who you guys would favour in this fight. Elliot, I'm going to go to you first. Who would lose their row in this fight?
Oh, before last night, I would have said Bivol, and I'm probably still edging that way, but it's narrowed significantly in my opinion from what it was previously. I think the thing for me really is just it's kind of the age factor, isn't it? Bitabayev, like 37. He is obviously sort of quite significantly older, and from a sort of athletic perspective, should be on the decline. So the question is, if they did fight, would that play a part in it? But yeah, you can't look past essentially the CV that he's got, which I still think is actually probably marginally better at the weight than Bivol's, even though Bivol beat Ramirez yesterday. But I think we said it on the preview before. Ramirez has had quite a comfortable record to get to that 44-0, and I think if we looked at it last night, Bitabayev just walked in and smashed Ramirez to pieces in about 2 or 3 rounds. We wouldn't be giving Bivol a chance. So, in a way, I'm kind of still leaning slightly towards him. But what would have been, a kind of 60-40, 65-35 is now really a sort of 55-45, sort of 52-48 kind of split. Frankly, it's a lot narrower than it was previously, in my opinion.
Yeah, a tough question. But look, I just hope they're by it's a bit like the welterweight division, arguably, in the sense that those two are just quite a bit further ahead than the rest of the division, arguably. I know some people would say a few things about Callum Smith, but yeah, we're not going to talk about that in this call. Danny, what are your thoughts? Beterbiev versus Bivol in 2023.
No, it's such a tough one. Like, I think they're like so much further clear than anyone in the division, to be honest. Even more so maybe than Spence and Crawford at welterweight. It's sort of notable what you said at the start. It's a 50-50 fight. I think before the Canelo fight last year, no one would have been describing it as a 50-50 fight. I think people would have probably thought, it's a competitive fight, but you'd be hard pressed to find someone who wouldn't make Beterbiev a considerable favourite. I think now that's changed dramatically. I think I'd maybe lean towards Bivol now. Beterbiev will be 38 if that fight happens. It'll be 38, I think, by the time the Yarde fight happens. I just think Bivol's judgment of range is so good, and Beterbiev's more than just a puncher. Like, he's a really, really technically good boxer in his own right, but I think the feet are sort of one of the things that do slow down. He's not the fleetest of foot anyway. He's by no means plodding. It would just sort of come down to whether Beterbiev can pin Bivol down for long enough to make its damage pay, and I'm just not sure he could. But it's I think it's maybe the fight I'd want to see most in boxing, to be honest. I've already sort of got sick of the Spence and Crawford chat, to be honest. It sort of left a sour taste with that fight, but would lean towards Bivol. And the sort of longer it gets without the fight happening, the more I would lean towards Bivol because of Beterbiev getting on. But such a good fight, just really hope we see it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, would be quite possibly could be the biggest fight we see in 2023. That's not a statement there, but just it's a possibility if certain fights don't happen. It would be a massive fight for next year. The second name that, of course, is being mentioned is the Canelo rematch. As we know, Bivol beat Canelo on points back in May. Bivol went in there as the underdog. Canelo was maybe a bit more off it than he could chew when it comes to weights. And it looked at times quite comfortable for Bivol. A lot of people only had Canelo winning 2 or 3 rounds of that 12-round contest. Same question, Bivol, Canelo 2, repeat or revenge, Danny?
Repeat, 100%. I don't want to see that fight again, to be honest with you. I'm sort of glad that the sort of stuff you've heard from Bivol post-fight, he seems to be all focused on the Beterbiev fight. I know he hasn't mentioned Beterbiev by name, but he said about winning more belts, and Beterbiev's the only man with any other belts, unless you're counting Podrick McCrory's AVO. But yeah, I don't see that fight going any way different. To be honest, I thought even though he won against Golovkin, I thought that was sort of the worst Canelo's look. Apart from the Bivol fight, I think he doesn't even really look the same fighter that fought certainly Saunders and Smith. I know there was maybe signs of a bit of decline against Plant, but I want to see Canelo stay at super middleweight and fight the winner of one of this. Hopefully David Benavidez if he comes through the Plant fight, even a David Morrell at super middleweight. And you want to see Bivol go for undisputed. I don't think there's any way Canelo can beat Bivol. I think not just the size, but I think there might be a bit of a skill advantage there as well, and it's just an absolute mountain to overcome. But it's probably the biggest payday still for Bivol, so you can't rule out it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if there's a possibility we could see Bivol face Beterbiev and maybe the winner faces Canelo, because then you would have kind of the undisputed light heavyweight champion facing the undisputed super middleweight champion, and that's a massive fight. So maybe that could happen next year. Elliot, Greg, do you agree with Danny? Do you think Bivol would beat Canelo again?
Yeah, I do agree with Danny, actually. On pretty much everything he said there, I agree with him. Not really that keen to see it, frankly, either. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd watch it, but I almost feel like, again, it'd be a Bivol UD unless there was some sort of judging interference. I don't really see it. I think I agree with what Danny says as well. I think you can look at it and go, okay, what were they like? They're usually campaigning at what sort of £7 difference, and Bivol's 6 foot and Canelo's 5'8" couple of inches reach disadvantage. But like Danny said as well, it's not just a case of that. There is a kind of skill, at least. If not, there's a kind of skill parity, if not a disadvantage for Canelo there either. And I think people were kind of saying actually about with Canelo, like, has he slipped a bit essentially recently? A lot of miles on his clock sort of thing. And I'm not going to write him off necessarily in that sense, but the argument is becoming louder than it was possibly when he lost to Bivol. I agree with Danny that third Triple G fight wasn't a stellar performance either. So I'd be honest with you, I don't particularly want to see it, even though I'd watch it. Would I pay for it? I'd probably team stream if I had to. But I think I think for Bivol it makes sense, doesn't it? I think as a fight, but I'd much rather see him fight Beterbiev, to be perfectly honest. That's the only fight I really want to see. And I agree with Danny, barring sort of Crawford Spence, Fury Usyk, kind of it's on that sort of level for me.
Yeah. I think we're all agreeing so far, and we've established kind of the 2 fights that are maybe most likely to happen in 2023. Wanted to throw a bit of a spanner in the works here. Bivol, he's only had 21 fights, so to kind of achieve what he has achieved in 21 fights and to think what he could achieve after 22, 23 fights is very impressive. He's about to turn 32. As I said, I'm not saying this is going to happen. It's a spanner in the works. But I like to discuss the idea of him possibly moving up to cruiserweight. Not saying it's going to happen. I just think that we have to accept it's a possibility. It's a step up in weight, and in say a year, 18 months time, he might think it might be a bit too difficult to make light heavyweight. I I don't think cruiserweight's one of these divisions where a lot of boxing fans have a lot of knowledge on. But if you look at some of the cruiserweight champions now, Lawrence Okoli, Ilunga Mukabu, who we know as well, how would Bivol get on with those guys, or that kind of level of cruiserweight? Do we think? I know it's a tough question, but I'm here to ask the tough questions. Elliot, gonna go back to you. How would Bivol fare as cruiserweight?
I think the weight difference, isn't it, between light heavy and cruiser is substantial. So, some of those other lighter weights, you're talking 4 pounds, or you're talking like 20 pounds, aren't you, in this one? Something like, it's not a sort of stroll in the park. I feel like some of the names you kind of mentioned, Okoli's like 6'5", 82-inch reach. That's 5 inches over Bivol in height, and about sort of 13 inches in reach, which is substantial and carries power. I'm not saying that Okoli by any stretch is a better boxer style wise than Bivol, but that's a large challenge to overcome. So to be honest with you, if you asked me to pick that far, I'd probably pick Okoli. As sacrilegious as that sounds to a lot of people, fighting someone like Mukabu, I could potentially see that as a better challenge, just because the sort of height wise it stacks up better as a champion. So, and obviously I think Mukabu's like 30, 34, 35 now. So if he steps up, gets him a sort of 36, 37, why not? Why not? There's a possibility there. Someone like, I'd like to see him in sort of fighting a kind of, if he did move up, kind of fighting a kind of old breeder to sort of break himself in or something. But I think, I don't know, like when you just mentioned Okoli there, I just think no. It'd be one of those things where, almost like Usyk Fury in a way, I just feel like the size would be too great for him to overcome. But equally, I think this is the gap between those two divisions is too big, in my opinion, to be bridged easily. We've seen other people try and do it, Kovalev, etc., people like that. And I just think it's a different division. I know they're all different divisions, but it's a significantly different division than it would be going from sort of middleweight to super middleweight, that sort of thing. So pick his champion wisely would be my advice, frankly.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it feels like I'd be interested to know how many fighters have been a world champion at light heavyweight and then gone up and doing the same at cruiserweight. It feels like it's a pretty difficult thing to do. Danny, would you agree with Elliot? What happens if Bivol moves up and fights, say, Lawrence Okoli? How much success can he have at cruiserweight?
Yeah, I think I agree completely with Elliot. I think picking his champion wisely would be absolutely key. I think Mukabu, as Elliot says, probably maybe the one to go for. Wouldn't be an absolutely huge size difference in there. Not for my money. Probably Mukabu would be heavier, but height-wise, maybe not a great deal. I think Goulamirian, the WBA champion, wouldn't be the worst bet. I think Okoli, Bivol versus Okoli is definitely not a fight I thought I'd be discussing. It's so hard to even imagine, but I just think the length of Okoli would probably be too much. And even if he wasn't able to land clean on him, just a sort of jab and lean on him, there would be surely about 3 stone, 4 stone of difference in there, you would imagine. Opataya as well, I think might be a bit too much. He's not as tall as Okoli, but he's big and he's good as well. So I think he was strong, but he definitely would be capable of winning a world title against either the sort of two I mentioned, Mukabu or Goulamirian, or should a belt become vacant. I don't think cruiserweight's a particularly deep weight class, but I think it's more likely you'd see him move down. I've seen Eddie Hearn chatting about maybe a move down to sort of middleweight. Bivol's always said he could make sort of middleweight. So if he was to move up and win at cruiserweight, it'd be, from what I can see, one of the sort of smallest fighters to do that. I think when you said that, I was struggling to think of people who've sort of won at light heavyweight and gone on to move at cruiserweight. I know cruiserweight's a fairly new weight class. I don't think Bellew ever won at light heavyweight, but he moved up and then won at cruiser, didn't he? So.
Yeah, I think you're just trying to wind Elliot Grigg up now. But this evening's taking a turn for the worse.
The connection's a bit dodgy, actually, mate. I think we're freezing. I think that's probably this broadcast should end on bad connection and bad opinion.
So speaking of opinions, we are going to round this call up doing something a bit different. As we know, we've got a thriving light heavyweight division here in the UK. I'm going to name 3 British fighters and I want your opinion on which British fighter has the best chance of beating Dmitry Bivol. Only catches the I don't want an explanation. I just want an answer. You don't have to justify it, and that's it. Danny, Callum Smith, Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Yard. If we were playing kind of fantasy boxing here, and you were managing these three fighters, who would you pick to go up against Dmitry Bivol? Callum Smith, Joshua Buatsi, Anthony Yard.
Callum Smith.
Elliot Grigg, what's your answer?
I'm going to say Callum Smith.
All right.
I'm going to say Callum Smith. But before we leave, I want to ask you actually, Stotty, because obviously, Danny and I didn't. Well, we agreed on a lot, but we did go with different winners. Bivol versus Bitabayev in the fight initially. So as deciding vote, casting vote here, which way would you lean?
Fantastic fight, but yeah, I would lean towards Bivol. I just think I look at him and I just think the way he handled Gilberto Ramirez, the way he handled Canelo, like, is it an exaggeration to call him a complete fighter? I'm not sure. Whereas Beterbiev's fantastic at what he does, but I just think I would edge towards Bivol. But as always, I just hope we see it. I hope we're not talking in a year's time saying, "Oh, I wonder what's going to happen," and then kind of we never.
We predict we never end up saying. So
he's getting on buses with a discount rate in Canada by the time we're talking about this fight happening.
Yeah, you never know. Okay, gents, always been fun discussing this. Really. Look, I think he's one of the most kind of exciting and well-known fighters in the world right now, Dmitry Bivol. I think people are really keen to know what his next steps are, and we will stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
No problem. Cheers.